cops beat a black teen on the street. One call to his dad. The Attorney General changes everything. A cold drizzle slicked the Chicago pavement, reflecting neon lights in pools of rainwater along Lakeshore Drive. Jamal Carter. A lanky 17-year-old just wanted to grab a late-night snack from a nearby convenience store before heading home. Little did he know that this short trip would become a turning point, not just for his life, but for an entire police precinct's future. When two patrol officers stopped him without cause, their nightsticks and fists spoke louder than any questions. But Jamal had one secret weapon, a single phone call. One call to a number that would change everything and unleash a storm none of them could have predicted. Jamal Carter was no stranger to the gritty reality of Chicago's streets. Born and raised on the South Side, he lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment with his mother, Valerie, and older sister, Tasha. His father, Kevin Carter, had separated from his mother years ago. Despite that emotional distance, Kevin remained a constant pillar of support, a phone call away, ready to step in whenever Jamal needed him. What very few people knew was that Kevin Carter wasn't just a busy professional working for the state. He was the Attorney General of Illinois, a man entrusted with upholding justice across the entire state. That drizzly night, Jamal found himself flipping through his mother's fridge, searching for something to snack on, but all he found was leftover spaghetti. Tasha was out with friends at a movie marathon. Valerie had fallen asleep early after a long shift at the hospital, where she worked as a nurse's aide. Jamal glanced at the clock on his phone, 10:37 p.m. For a teenage night owl like him, this was still early, but he knew he shouldn't push curfew too hard. He settled on walking 4 blocks down to a convenience store for a bag of chips and a soda. Chicago's lights shimmered against the puddles in the cracked sidewalks. Car engines buzzed in the distance, muffled by the low-hanging clouds of early spring rain. As Jamal walked, he pulled his hood up, shielding himself from the drizzle. He had been told countless times by his mother to keep that hood down. It makes people suspicious. But it was cold, and the hood made him feel a bit safer in a city that could sometimes be anything but safe. He stepped into the convenience store, wiping the rain off his face. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a dull hum across aisles packed with snacks, canned goods, and cheap household items. He grabbed his favorite sour cream and onion chips, a bottle of grape soda, and a chocolate bar for Tasha, hoping it would smooth out any scolding he might get for staying out too late. The cashier recognized him. Mr. Phillips, an older gentleman who often gave Jamal free advice with every purchase. Tonight, Mr. Phillips just nodded wearily. It had been a slow evening, and he was eager to close up. Jamal stepped back outside into the chill, pulling his hood tight. A sense of unease prickled at the back of his mind. It wasn't anything he could pinpoint, just that intangible feeling that something was off in the air. He shrugged it off. Maybe it was the flickering streetlights or the way the wind carried distant sirens. He barely walked half a block when a police cruiser rolled slowly by. Jamal glanced at the car and kept walking. He had no reason to feel guilty. He had done nothing wrong, but the stories he'd heard from friends and from the news coverage about unwarranted police stops lingered in his thoughts. As soon as the cruiser passed him, it pulled over and stopped abruptly. 2 officers stepped out, boots splashing into a shallow puddle. Officers Raymond Fuller and Ethan Briggs were not from the local neighborhood precinct. They had been recently transferred to the South Side from a quieter suburban district. Word on the street was that they were eager to clean up certain areas, and their methods could be aggressive. It was rumored they had already been involved in a few questionable confrontations. "Stop right there," barked Officer Fuller, a tall man with a heavy build and eyes narrowed in suspicion. Jamal paused. His heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had heard the cautionary tales: keep your hands visible, do not resist, comply politely, and above all, don't make any sudden moves. He slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms facing out. "Yes, officer. This is a high-crime area." Officer Briggs chimed in, scanning Jamal's face. "You got ID on you?" "Yes, sir," Jamal replied, fumbling for his wallet. "I live just a few blocks away. I was heading home." He handed over his school ID, the only identification he had with him. Officer Fuller sneered at the plastic card. "And why are you out here at this hour?" "I was just at the store to get a snack," Jamal explained, mustering as much calm as possible. "Sarcasm won't help," Kid Briggs muttered, stepping closer. "We've had reports of loitering and suspicious behavior in the neighborhood. Thought you might be one of them troublemakers." Jamal's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and resentment. "I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to go home." Both officers exchanged a glance that seemed more than skepticism. It carried an undercurrent of contempt. Jamal felt the tension rise between them as the drizzle turned into a heavier shower. Cars passing by slowed momentarily, curious about the scene, but most kept going. No one wanted to get involved. "Hands on the wall," Fuller ordered. Jamal's heart dropped. He was just 17, had no record, and had done nothing wrong. He complied, pressing his palms against the cold, damp brick facade of a closed pharmacy. Rain trickled down the back of his neck, sending chills through his entire body. He tried to steady his breath as Officer Briggs patted him down roughly. The bag of chips and the soda slipped from Jamal's grasp, falling into the wet gutter. He clenched his jaw, fighting back frustration. He didn't want to make them any more aggressive. When Briggs found nothing, he shoved Jamal to the side. "Empty your pockets." Jamal turned, emptying out everything. He had a few crumpled bills, his phone, and the change from his purchase. "That's all I have." Fuller examined the items, raining water streaking down his uniform. The sour look on his face suggested he was disappointed at finding nothing incriminating. Then, in a move that felt entirely unnecessary, Fuller grabbed Jamal's arm and twisted it behind his back. Pain flared in Jamal's shoulder as he winced. "Hold still," Fuller growled, pressing Jamal against the wall once more. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." "Jamal," pleaded voice, cracking with fear. The press of the officer's forearm against his neck made it hard to breathe. But Fuller leaned in, whispering a string of curses. Briggs stood a foot away, smirking. A second later, Fuller's baton came down hard, striking Jamal's ribs. Jamal let out a pained gasp. He could barely comprehend what was happening. He had just wanted a snack. Now he was being battered on a rainy sidewalk for no reason he could understand. Officer Briggs took a step forward. "One more thing, boy. You got a big mouth on you," Jamal tried to speak, but only a choked cough escaped. Briggs swung his baton into Jamal's side again. Agony shot through him, nearly knocking him off his feet. Within moments, the quiet side street had transformed into a personal nightmare for Jamal. He tasted blood-sore stars as the baton connected with his temple. Lights spun, and his vision blurred. The only clear thought in his head was that he had to survive this. He had to get home to his mother. He had to see Tasha again. And he had to remember somewhere in his pocket his phone was still there. The assault felt like it lasted forever, though it may have been just a minute or two. Jamal's world was pain, confusion, and the overwhelming sting of injustice. Finally, Briggs grabbed him by the collar and shoved him onto the pavement. Jamal landed hard, scraping his hands and knees on the gritty asphalt. So next time Officer Briggs hissed, "You won't be?" He paused as his radio crackled. Another call was coming in. Briggs took a step back to listen. Officer Fuller snorted, looking down at Jamal in disgust. Jamal's phone had skittered near the curb. Summoning what little strength remained, he inched toward it. His left eye felt swollen shut, and his side throbbed with each breath. He prayed the phone was still working, despite the rain and the beating it might have taken. Just as Briggs turned back toward him, Jamal's fingers closed around the phone. He managed to roll onto his back. With the last bit of energy, he pressed the speed dial button labeled simply Dad. "Who the hell you calling Fuller?" barked, stepping toward him. But it was too late. The phone was already ringing. Jamal pressed the speaker button so he could at least let his father hear what was happening, even if he couldn't hold the phone to his ear. The ringtone felt like a lifeline in a storm of brutality. It went to voicemail. Despair clutched Jamal's heart. With trembling breaths, he tried one more time. Officer Briggs yanked at Jamal's collar, forcing him halfway up from the pavement. Suddenly there was a voice on the line. "Hello?" It was Kevin Carter. "Dad!" Jamal croaked, spitting out blood. "I need help." Kevin's voice sharpened instantly with concern. "Jamal, where are you? What's happening?" Before Jamal could reply, Fuller snatched the phone, but the line remained. "Open." A rough voice came through the speaker. "Kid's in trouble," Fuller sneered. Then the officer ended the call. Yet that brief exchange was enough. Kevin Carter was no ordinary father. He was the top law enforcement official for the state, and every fiber of his being ignited with fear and anger when he heard his son's voice, raspy with pain and desperation. At that very moment, Kevin Carter was finishing a late-night meeting in his downtown Chicago office. He had been working with staff attorneys on a high-profile corruption case targeting an alderman. The job was grueling, but he found a sense of purpose in it. While rummaging through a stack of legal briefs, Kevin's phone buzzed, once then fell silent. He usually would ignore calls if he was in a meeting, but something told him to check. When he saw Jamal's name on the screen, a father's intuition kicked in. Why would Jamal call so late? He stepped away from the table to listen to the voicemail. All he heard was a muffled scuffle, sounds of violence, and Jamal's single cry for help. "Dad, I need help." Then a click, and the message ended. Kevin's blood ran cold. Without a second thought, he snatched his coat from the back of the chair and rushed out. Several staffers called after him, but he waved them off, heading straight to the elevator. Down in the parking garage, he jumped into his black SUV, fumbling with the GPS tracking app he'd installed on Jamal's phone. Part of him felt guilty for installing it, but that paternal worry had always whispered that it was better to be safe than sorry. The app eventually located Jamal's phone near a dimly lit intersection on the south side, about 15 minutes from the Capitol Building extension in Chicago, where Kevin's office was located. Kevin sped down the wet streets, weaving through late-night traffic with an urgency that overshadowed any concern for traffic laws. As Attorney General, he had certain privileges, but tonight he was acting purely as a father. Halfway there, his phone rang. It was Valerie. "Kevin," she said, her voice cracked with alarm. "I just got a call from Jamal's phone. Something's wrong. I heard a man's voice, some noise. Then it went dead." "I'm on my way," Kevin replied, gritting his teeth. "Stay at home in case he comes back. I'll find him." He pressed the gas pedal harder, praying he wouldn't arrive too late. Just a block away from where the beating took place, a scrawny teenager named Tyrell peered out from behind a street corner. He was the same age as Jamal, known in the neighborhood for always having a camera in his hand. He dreamed of being a filmmaker someday. When he heard shouts and thuds echoing through the rainy street, Tyrell couldn't help but investigate. His curiosity often led him into precarious situations, but tonight it might prove life-saving. From a shadowy recess between two buildings, he filmed the incident using his phone's camera. The angle wasn't perfect, but it captured enough two police officers' uniforms, visible under the streetlight, assaulting Jamal as he lay defenseless on the pavement. Tyrell's heart hammered in his chest. He knew if the cops spotted him, he could be in danger. Yet the fear didn't stop him. He held the camera phone steady, capturing everything he could. If there was ever a moment to stand up for what was right, this was it. After the beating, the officers seemed to argue briefly. Tyrell couldn't hear every word, but it was clear they were discussing what to do next. One officer seemed tense, worried, while the other remained brazen and furious. Tyrell realized they might try to arrest Jamal on some made-up charge. He saw Jamal's phone on the ground screen, lit. If only the father on the other end could see what was happening. Tyrell decided to keep filming. Suddenly, the cruiser's radio blared, prompting the officers to respond. They threw Jamal into the back seat of the cruiser, with little care for his injuries. Tyrell realized they were taking him away. Where to? The station, a hospital. Another remote location. Panic seized Tyrell. This was turning into a nightmare. He took a deep breath, then dashed behind the car as it sped off. He had captured their license plate on video, but that might not be enough. He considered trying to follow them, but he was on foot. The cruiser disappeared into the darkness. Tyrell knew he had to do something. Ducking into the nearest diner that was still open, he scrolled through his phone's contact list and found Ms. Evelyn Thomas, a local community activist who had spoken at his school about citizens' rights during encounters with the police. She had urged students to document any injustice they witnessed and to reach out for help. Maybe she could help now. Officer Fuller drove, while Briggs sat in the passenger seat occasionally glancing back at Jamal, who lay slumped on the back seat with his hands zip-tied. Blood trickled down the side of Jamal's face, staining the cruiser's dark upholstery. He tried to remain conscious, but the throbbing in his head and the ache in his ribs made each breath feel like shards of glass slicing into his lungs. Every time the cruiser hit a pothole or made a sharp turn, Jamal couldn't help groaning in pain. He feared for his life. Was this how things ended for him, alone, battered and powerless? Briggs's radio squawked, demanding a status update on a call about nearby gunshots, but the officers ignored it. Instead, Fuller growled, "We gotta figure out what to do with this punk. We can't just drop him at the station," Briggs said, tension cracking in his voice. "He called someone before we took his phone." Fuller slammed a fist against the steering wheel. "For all we know, he called his thug friends. We'll dump him in the holding cell. We'll say he resisted arrest, assaulted us. Who's gonna believe him over us?" Jamal's mind raced. He had to let them know who his father was. But would that make things worse? He'd heard stories of cops retaliating even more when they discovered they'd roughed up the wrong person. Fear clashed with desperation inside him. In a raspy voice, he managed to speak. "My father, he's Kevin Carter." Fuller sneered at him through the rearview mirror. "So, that's supposed to scare us?" Jamal coughed, spitting out more blood. "He's the Attorney General of Illinois." A tense silence filled the cruiser. Briggs glanced uncertainly at Fuller. The weight of those words hung in the air. But Fuller just let out a low, mocking laugh. "Kid, you're full of it." "Attorney General." "Sure. Next thing you'll tell us you're the mayor's nephew." The cruiser sped down a deserted road until they reached the 9th Precinct Station, a dilapidated old building known in the community for a high volume of complaints against officers. The precinct had a reputation for rough policing. Fuller parked out back. Yellowed streetlights cast long shadows across the wet asphalt. Briggs opened the back door, yanked Jamal out, and dragged him inside. Every step felt like walking on knives. The station's fluorescent lights flickered ominously in the narrow hallway leading to holding cells. Jamal's vision blurred, but he caught glimpses of file cabinets, a battered water cooler, and walls lined with official notices. The stench of stale coffee and disinfectant mixed with the coppery smell of his own blood. Fuller led him to a holding cell, shoving him inside. The cell door clanged shut behind him. Officer Briggs switched off the light in the cell, plunging Jamal into near darkness. "We'll deal with you in the morning," Fuller growled. "If you're telling the truth about your old man being the Attorney General, I guess we'll find out soon enough." Jamal collapsed onto a metal bench bolted to the wall. He wanted to protest, but pain overtook him. The last thing he heard was the echo of the officer's boots fading away, leaving him alone with the darkness and his battered body. Kevin Carter's SUV screeched to a halt near the location Jamal's phone had last pinged. All he found was an empty, rain-slicked street. No sign of his son. No sign of the police cruiser. Heart-pounding, Kevin sprinted through the scattered puddles, calling out, "Jamal, Jamal!" But only the distant rumble of city traffic answered him. Desperate for leads, he noticed a small diner across the street with lights still on. He rushed inside. A flickering neon sign buzzed overhead. The place was nearly empty, just a tired waitress and one patron hunched over a coffee. "Excuse me," Kevin said breathlessly. "Did anyone see a young man here?" 17, wearing a hooded sweatshirt, maybe forced into a police car. The waitress looked startled. She shook her head, but then the man at the counter turned around. It was Tyrell, the teenage witness who had captured everything on video. He recognized Kevin's face from news segments. Kevin Carter was known statewide, charismatic, tough on corruption, always giving speeches about justice. Tyrell stood up so abruptly, he nearly knocked over his coffee. "Mr. Carter," Tyrell asked hesitantly. "You know me," Kevin replied. Confusion etched across his face. "You're the Attorney General," Tyrell said, pulling out his phone. "I think your son might be in real trouble. I saw some cops beating him up. I got it on video." Kevin felt a wrenching pain in his chest. The word beating hammered at his mind. What happened is he?" Tyrell handed over his phone, playing the footage. Though shaky, the video clearly showed 2 officers in uniform assaulting Jamal with brutal force. Kevin's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Never had he imagined he would be on the receiving end of the very injustices he had sworn to fight. He took a moment to steady his voice. "Thank you for recording this," he finally said, his eyes dark with rage and fear. "Do you have any idea which precinct they were from?" Tyrell shrugged. "I just got the license plate on the cruiser. Maybe you can track it." Kevin copied the license plate number and quickly called his contact in the state police. On the phone, he demanded, "I need to know which precinct car 54291 belongs to, and I need it now." Kevin's voice was cold, lethal with paternal fury. Although the officer on the other end hesitated, he eventually complied under the weight of who Kevin was. Within a minute, Kevin had the information he needed. The cruiser was assigned to the 9th Precinct on the south side. He turned back to Tyrell, handing the phone over. "This video is important. I need you to keep it safe. Email it to me. Back it up somewhere. Don't let anyone erase it, all right?" Tyrell nodded. "Yes, sir." Should I come with you?" Kevin paused. Having a witness could be crucial, but he also didn't want to risk the boy's safety. "You did enough already. Get home safe. I might need your testimony, but let's take this one step at a time." Tyrell left the diner, casting a worried glance back at Kevin. The Attorney General thanked the waitress briefly, then hurried out, phone still in hand. He jumped into his SUV engine, roaring as he sped off toward the 9th Precinct. The images from the video burned in his mind, fueling his determination and dread. Back at the station, a slender detective named Carla Mendoza sat at her desk in the detective's bullpen. She'd transferred to the 9th Precinct about a year ago, determined to clean it up from the inside. She was well aware of the precinct's tarnished reputation, and she had personally investigated numerous allegations against certain officers. But the blue wall of silence was a real and formidable obstacle. A phone call from dispatch alerted her that the Illinois Attorney General was on his way to the station, looking for a suspect. This set off alarm bells in Carla's head. Usually, top officials didn't stroll into this precinct unannounced at midnight, especially not the Attorney General. She put down the missing person file she was working on and made her way to the front desk. Within 10 minutes, Kevin Carter stormed into the station, drenched from the rain and raging with paternal anger. The desk sergeant, a grizzled officer who looked half asleep, nearly dropped his mug when he recognized the state's top prosecutor. "I need to see my son Jamal Carter right now," Kevin demanded, voice echoing across the stark, fluorescent-lit lobby. Several officers milling about turned to stare. The desk sergeant stammered, "Sir, we, don't have... He's let me check." His eyes darted to a clipboard, flipping pages. "We do have a John Doe that was brought in about half an hour ago by Officers Fuller and Briggs. Minor. Injured." A wave of relief and fury washed over Kevin. "I'm going back there," he said, stepping past the front desk without waiting for permission. That was when Detective Carla Mendoza intervened quickly, flashing her badge at both Kevin and the sergeant. "Attorney General Carter, let me help you. If your son is here, I'll find him. This precinct can be confusing at night." She offered a no-nonsense but empathetic look. Kevin, practically vibrating with anger, nodded. He could sense a sincerity in Carla's gaze. She wasn't part of the rot in this station. "Fine. Let's go." Detective Mendoza led Kevin down a series of drab corridors, past a line of offices and an interrogation room. The overhead lights flickered, revealing cracked tiles and peeling paint, telling signs of the station's neglect. As they walked, Kevin grilled her with pointed questions. "I want to know who's on duty," he snapped. "I want to know which watch commander authorized this. And I want the logs for that cruiser." Mendoza gave curt nods as she scribbled notes on a small notepad. "I understand. We'll get to the bottom of this. I've been suspicious of Fuller and Briggs for a while now. You can count on my cooperation." They reached the holding cell block, which smelled of disinfectant and stale sweat. Mendoza flipped through a set of keys she'd grabbed from the watch commander's desk. Kevin hovered behind, fists clenched. She unlocked a cell at the far end and opened it with a grating creak. Inside, Jamal lay curled on the metal bench, dried blood on his face. One eye was swollen, and bruises marred his arms. His shirt was ripped, revealing a deep bruise across his ribcage. Kevin's heart lurched. He rushed in, falling to his knees beside his unconscious son. "Jamal, Jamal. Can you hear me?" Kevin's voice wavered with panic. He gently cradled Jamal's head, checking for signs of responsiveness. Finally, Jamal stirred, letting out a weak groan. Relief flooded Kevin, but it was quickly overshadowed by a searing rage. "We need a medic," Kevin barked at Mendoza. Without hesitation, she radioed for an ambulance. Then she turned to see Fuller and Briggs stepping into the corridor, looking stunned to find the Attorney General in their domain. Kevin stood, carefully laying Jamal's head back on the bench. The towering fury in his eyes made both officers take a step back. "This your kid?" Fuller asked. His voice shook, betraying the bravado he'd shown earlier. "You know damn well he's my kid," Kevin hissed. "You brutalized him. You left him here without medical attention." Briggs cleared his throat, trying to salvage the situation. He resisted arrest. Briggs lied, though his face betrayed doubt. He was acting suspicious. He attacked us first. Mendoza glanced at Kevin, who was trembling with rage. She spoke with surprising calm. "Officers, do you have body cam footage to substantiate that claim?" "Body cams were malfunctioning," Fuller muttered. "Interesting coincidence," Mendoza replied. She had heard that excuse from them before. Kevin stepped closer, practically nose to nose with Fuller. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he seethed. "I have a witness video proving you assaulted my son without cause. It's in my possession." At that news, Fuller paled, and Briggs's eyes widened. Whatever flimsy story they planned to concoct was about to be shredded. Mendoza decided to take control before the confrontation erupted into violence. She motioned for nearby officers to escort Fuller and Briggs to a side room, while Kevin remained with Jamal. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. They carefully loaded Jamal onto a stretcher. Kevin insisted on riding along in the ambulance. "I'll be in touch," Detective Kevin told Mendoza grimly. "I expect you to do the right thing here." Mendoza nodded relief, mingling with uncertainty. She had always wanted to expose the corruption within the precinct, but she hadn't expected such an explosive scenario. Now the top law enforcement officer in the state was personally involved, which might be the impetus for real change or a catalyst for chaos. Jamal was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital with Kevin by his side. The hustle of doctors and nurses surrounded them in the emergency room. Valerie arrived moments later, breathless and terrified. When she saw Jamal's battered face, she nearly collapsed. Kevin supported her, offering whatever comfort he could, though his own heart was torn to shreds. The doctors confirmed Jamal had a concussion, bruised ribs, and a possible hairline fracture in his arm. Kevin watched them work with methodical precision, hooking Jamal up to IVs, checking his vitals, cleaning his wounds. Time blurred. A mix of fear, guilt, and fury gnawed at Kevin's every thought. How could this happen to his son? Why was police brutality so rampant that even the son of the Attorney General wasn't safe? Eventually, a nurse let Kevin and Valerie into Jamal's room. The teen looked small and fragile beneath the white hospital sheets. His eyelids fluttered open when he sensed his parents' presence. "Dad, Mom," he whispered, voice raw and weak. Valerie leaned in, brushing his hair back gently. "We're here, baby. We're here." Kevin took Jamal's hand. "I'm so sorry this happened." "Dad, I was so scared," Jamal confessed, tears forming in his eyes. "They just attacked me. I didn't do anything." Valerie stifled a sob, and Kevin squeezed his son's hand. "I know, and we're going to make this right." Just then, Tasha burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, Jamal!" She rushed to hug him as gently as she could. The siblings exchanged comforting looks, an unspoken bond in their shared relief that Jamal was alive. Outside the hospital room, though, a storm was brewing. Reporters had somehow caught wind that Kevin Carter's son had been assaulted by police. News vans were already circling the hospital parking lot. Cameras waited by the entrance for any statement. The story was too sensational to ignore. Cops beat black teen who turns out to be Attorney General's son. Kevin had no intention of speaking to the media yet. First, he wanted to ensure Jamal was stable. Then he would unleash every legal avenue available to bring Fuller and Briggs to justice. A relentless determination pulsed in his veins. The next morning, Kevin woke in a cramped hospital chair by Jamal's bedside. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues, journalists, and political allies. While Valerie dozed in another chair, Kevin stepped into the hallway to take a call from Governor Martin Wells. The older politician wasted no time. "Kevin, is it true? Those officers who assaulted your son, are they still on duty?" "Governor, they're at the 9th Precinct. I've demanded they be put on administrative leave pending an investigation." The governor sighed heavily. "I don't condone police brutality. You know that. But I have to consider the ramifications this is going to ignite a firestorm. We need to handle it delicately." Kevin felt a spark of anger. "Delicately? Governor, my son was beaten unconscious by 2 men with badges. That's not a delicate matter. I intend to press charges. I'll call for a full internal and external investigation." A pause. "I understand. But you know how the FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, can be. The union is powerful. They'll defend their own. This could turn into a massive legal battle, not to mention the racial tensions that might flare up." Kevin's voice was steely. "Let them come. The law is the law, regardless of their union. If we can't bring justice here, we have no right to call ourselves leaders." The governor didn't argue. "All right, Kevin. I'll support your decision publicly, but be prepared for serious pushback. Do what you need to do." When the call ended, Kevin leaned against the hospital corridor wall, exhaling the tension in his chest. He had unwavering resolve, but he wasn't naive. He knew the next steps would be messy, politically fraught, and personally painful. Detective Mendoza arrived at the hospital to update him. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "Mr. Attorney General, we placed Officers Fuller and Briggs on desk duty for now, but they remain in the station. The chief is calling for an internal affairs investigation. I've filed a preliminary report." Kevin studied her. "Thank you for doing your job. But I want these men charged with assault and battery. Attempted murder, if that can be substantiated. Jamal is a minor." Mendoza nodded. "I agree. But we'll need the district attorney's sign-off." Kevin pursed his lips. "I'll handle the DA. I have enough clout to ensure they don't sweep this under the rug. Also, I have a witness who filmed the entire beating. Let me know if you need that footage." Mendoza's eyes flickered with relief. "That might be our most crucial piece of evidence. Send me a copy as soon as you can." What no one expected was the next twist. A day after the assault, a mysterious individual leaked a heavily edited body cam video to the press, which seemed to show Jamal allegedly lunging at the officers. The footage was obviously manipulated, spliced together with stock clips or from other arrests, but it caused an immediate media controversy. Some pundits on local networks questioned Jamal's innocence, suggesting he might have provoked the officers. Kevin watched the segment on a hospital TV, fury boiling in his gut. "This is nonsense. Those cops probably doctored the footage to smear Jamal," he muttered. Valerie, seated beside him, clenched her fists. The stress was palpable. Motherly protectiveness radiated from her. Shortly after that broadcast, the Fraternal Order of Police spokesperson held a press conference. He asserted that, unfortunately, the suspect did not comply, leading to a scuffle, and that Officers Fuller and Briggs followed standard procedure. The spokesperson insisted that the union would fight any charges against them. Our officers should not be vilified without all the facts, he concluded. Kevin wanted to throw something at the TV screen. He forced himself to take a deep breath. He had built his reputation on methodical, relentless pursuit of the truth. Now he had to practice what he preached, gather evidence, build a case, and win it decisively. Meanwhile, Tyrell, the teenage witness, felt the weight of his own role in this drama. After seeing the fabricated video clips on the news, he posted his own unedited footage on social media, tagging major Chicago news outlets and local activists. The video went viral within hours. People across the city were outraged, flooding the FOP's press conference live stream with angry comments. Community leaders, including Ms. Evelyn Thomas, organized a protest outside the 9th Precinct. Hundreds gathered holding signs reading, "Justice for Jamal and no more police brutality." Tensions simmered, but the protest remained largely peaceful, focusing on accountability for the officers involved. As the story gained traction, national outlets picked it up. Kevin's phone was inundated with requests for interviews. Although he knew a media statement was inevitable, he first wanted to make sure the legal wheels were turning properly. Detective Mendoza worked closely with the state police to conduct a swift investigation. They took statements from paramedics, pulled the 9th Precinct surveillance footage, which partially showed Jamal being dragged in, obviously injured, and obtained medical records, confirming the severity of Jamal's wounds. Tyrell's raw video became the linchpin. It showed the brutality in stark detail, contradicting any claim that Jamal had resisted. Armed with this evidence, Kevin marched into the Cook County District Attorney's office. The DA, a cautious man named Robert Alpern, was known for treading lightly when it came to police misconduct cases. Nonetheless, the evidence was too substantial to ignore, and Kevin's presence made it impossible for Alpern to brush it aside. Reluctantly, the DA filed criminal charges against Officers Fuller and Briggs, including aggravated battery and official misconduct. Within hours, Internal Affairs arrived at the 9th Precinct to place both officers under arrest. The image of them being led out in handcuffs flashed across the local news, shocking many. Most police officers never expected to see their own in custody so quickly. The FOP spokesperson sputtered about a rush to judgment, but the majority of the public felt a sense of vindication, an overdue reckoning for systemic abuses. The legal process moved faster than usual, partly due to the high-profile nature of the case, and partly because Kevin Carter's influence sped things along. The officer's defense attorney claimed the edited footage was a misunderstanding, that the real body cam footage had been lost, and that Tyrell's video didn't capture the full encounter. They argued that Jamal might have been carrying a concealed weapon, and that the officers had to act. However, each lie unraveled under scrutiny. There was no weapon. Jamal's injuries were extensive. Tyrell's footage was consistent and had a clear time stamp. In pre-trial hearings, the judge refused to dismiss the charges, citing strong evidence of misconduct. The trial date was set. Meanwhile, Jamal slowly recovered at home, supported by his family. Physiotherapy sessions helped with the bruised ribs, and the concussion symptoms gradually diminished. The emotional scars, however, ran deeper. Nightmares haunted him. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, reliving the assault. Kevin noticed the flicker of fear in Jamal's eyes whenever he saw a police car. Valerie tried to soothe him, But it was Tasha who often sat up late talking to her brother, listening to his worries about trust justice and the meaning of safety. On the day of the trial's opening statements, a crowd of protesters, activists, and media gathered outside the Cook County Courthouse. Kevin insisted Jamal stay home, fearing the stress might be too great. But Jamal, determined, showed up wearing a crisp shirt and a tie. He wanted the court and the world to see his face, the face of a teenager who almost lost his life to police brutality. The prosecution laid out a damning case. They played Tyrell's video in open court, describing each blow that landed on Jamal. They introduced medical testimony, verifying the severity of his injuries. Detective Mendoza took the stand, explaining that she found no probable cause for Jamal's arrest, and that the officers had provided no legitimate explanation for using force. The final blow to the defense's argument came when forensic experts testified that the so-called body cam footage the defense presented was heavily doctored and contained inconsistencies in timestamps. When it was Tyrell's turn to testify, he spoke resolutely. "I was scared," he admitted, "but I knew if I didn't record it, no one would believe us. I just couldn't let it go." His words resonated powerfully, reflecting the often unseen role of bystanders and citizen journalists in exposing abuses. Officer Fuller and Officer Briggs looked increasingly nervous, their faces drawn and pale. Their once confident smirks disappeared, replaced by the realization that the case against them was nearly insurmountable. After 2 weeks of testimony, witness statements, and cross-examinations, the jury took less than a day to deliberate. They returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Fuller tried to curse under his breath, while Briggs sank into his seat. The judge ordered them remanded into custody, pending sentencing. In a city where so many similar cases had been dismissed or ruled in favor of officers, this verdict was monumental. News outlets called it a turning point, a rare instance where justice was served against police who crossed the line. A wave of relief and hope washed over many communities who had felt voiceless for so long. The conviction of Fuller and Briggs sent a message that no one, regardless of their uniform, is above the law. Kevin Carter stood outside the courthouse, flanked by Valerie Tasha and a still-recovering Jamal. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted forward. But Kevin, normally composed, spoke from the heart. "I am here today, not just as the Attorney General, but as a father. What happened to my son should never happen to anyone's child. This verdict is a step toward restoring faith in the justice system. We must continue to hold accountable those who abuse their power. As Attorney General, I vow to keep fighting for fairness and equality under the law." Jamal, his arm in a sling, managed a small smile. It felt surreal to see the officers who had terrorized him now awaiting prison time, a swirl of emotions, relief, lingering trauma, but also hope settled in his chest. Tasha gripped his other hand, tears of vindication glimmering in her eyes. Valerie whispered, "We did it, baby," as a tear slid down her cheek. Tyrell stood off to the side, filming the moment with pride. He had come forward, risking intimidation, or worse, to expose the truth. Now he was receiving wide praise for his courage. Colleges reached out, offering scholarships in journalism or film, impressed by his willingness to stand up for justice. In the ensuing weeks, the Chicago Police Department faced a broader investigation. Internal Affairs uncovered a web of misconduct in the 9th Precinct. Officers who had once felt untouchable were reassigned or put under scrutiny. Some resigned. Others faced disciplinary actions. An independent oversight committee working with Kevin's office recommended sweeping reforms to address systemic issues. Community activists used the momentum from Jamal's case to push for new legislation requiring body cameras to upload footage in real time to an external server preventing tampering. They also advocated for stricter penalties for officers who engaged in brutality or attempted cover-ups. Kevin championed these initiatives, leveraging his position to build a coalition of lawmakers who finally recognized that something had to change. Jamal's recovery continued. He saw a therapist joined a support group for victims of police violence and started volunteering at a local non-profit dedicated to bridging gaps between police and the community. Though he still flinched at the sight of uniforms, he also recognized the importance of good policing. Not all cops are bad, he told a group of younger teens one day. But the system can be bad if we don't hold it accountable. Within a year, Jamal's physical wounds had mostly healed. The emotional ones remained, but he had channeled his trauma into advocacy. Meanwhile, Kevin Carter's office hammered down on reforms, working alongside an energized public. The 9th Precinct, once notorious, began to see a shift in leadership and ethos thanks to the determination of people like Detective Mendoza, who used her position to weed out corruption. Late one evening, Kevin invited Jamal, Tasha, and Valerie to a small victory dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant near Millennium Park. Soft lights glowed along the sidewalks, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh pasta from the open doors. As they sat down, Kevin made a toast. "To Jamal for his bravery and resilience," he said, raising a glass of sparkling cider. "And to Tyrell, who couldn't be with us tonight, but who showed the power of truth. To Detective Mendoza, who stood by justice, and to all of us for fighting to make things better." They clinked glasses, the atmosphere tinged with a bittersweet sense of gratitude. Jamal felt a warm surge of pride. It wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced or terrorized. Tonight's meal was more than a celebration. It was a renewal of their commitment to keep pushing for real change. When dessert arrived, Tasha teased Jamal. "You realize you're basically famous now, right? People are writing articles about you, calling you a survivor of police brutality who sparked reform." Jamal rolled his eyes with a timid smile. "I'd rather just be known for my basketball moves." A collective laugh rose from the table, tension dissolving in that moment of familial warmth. Even though the journey had been harrowing, there was a sense of rebirth in the air, a feeling that something crucial had shifted in the city's conscience. Months turned into a year. Fuller and Briggs each received substantial prison sentences. Their appeals fell flat as the evidence was overwhelmingly against them. The Chicago Police Department updated training protocols focusing on de-escalation tactics and community engagement. A police oversight board, which once existed only in name, began functioning with real authority, instigating monthly reviews and random audits of precinct activities. Kevin Carter continued serving as Attorney General, championing reforms, not just in Chicago, but statewide. Though some politicians labeled him controversial for taking such a hard stance, public support soared. Communities of color admired him for daring to hold the system accountable, while moderate voters respected his evidence-based, methodical approach. Meanwhile, Jamal returned to high school, determined to excel and prove that this nightmare wouldn't define him. He joined the student council, started a debate club focusing on social justice issues, and occasionally spoke at assemblies about youth empowerment and the importance of lawful policing. Tyrell Boyd, by the sudden attention, managed to secure a mentorship with a local documentary filmmaker. He started working on a short film about the events surrounding Jamal's assault, weaving in interviews with other victims of police violence and social justice leaders. Detective Mendoza appeared in the film, recounting her struggle to fight corruption from within. The documentary, titled Streetlight Justice, garnered local acclaim, eventually screening at an independent film festival in Chicago. On the first anniversary of Jamal's assault, Kevin, Valerie, Tasha, and Jamal attended a community rally where Miss Evelyn Thomas declared the date a day of reflection, urging the city to pause and remember how close they had come to another tragedy lost in the headlines. The theme was accountability, and Jamal delivered a short speech. "I shouldn't have had to be the son of the Attorney General to get justice," he said, voice reverberating through the microphone. "But I was, and I used that privilege to shine a light on a problem that affects so many of us. My hope is that one day no one will need powerful connections to be treated with dignity by law enforcement." Applause thundered through the crowd. Jamal stepped down from the podium, tears stinging his eyes. Tasha gave him a fierce hug, while Kevin and Valerie beamed with pride. Though the road to reform remained long, the events sparked by Jamal's assault had catalyzed a meaningful shift in Chicago. The case served as a reminder that the law could indeed protect the marginalized if wielded by people of integrity and bolstered by public scrutiny. There were still incidents of police misconduct, still challenges in implementing reforms, still tense encounters in certain neighborhoods. But something had changed. The old excuse that it's just the system held less sway. People demanded accountability, and those in power knew they could no longer ignore that demand without consequence. Jamal, his scars, both visible and invisible, carried on with life, determined to carve out a future where stories like his would become less and less common. He had learned that justice wasn't a static concept. It was an ongoing process, shaped by courage, perseverance, and collective will. The beating he suffered, the phone call to his dad, the shocking revelation that he was the Attorney General's son. All of it became part of a broader narrative about a city and a system in dire need of reform. And while Jamal wished it hadn't taken his trauma to spur change, he also recognized that his story was now part of Chicago's history, a chapter that might one day be remembered as the moment a broken system began to heal. And so ends the story of how a single phone call to the right person sparked the unraveling of deep-rooted police misconduct. Jamal Carter survived a brutal encounter and used his unexpected platform to push for change. The karma that struck Officers Fuller and Briggs served as a powerful message. No one, not even those in uniform, is immune from accountability. But the journey doesn't stop here. Jamal's story reminds us that justice is more than a courtroom verdict or a headline. It's an ongoing commitment to transparency, community engagement, and the willingness to speak out even when fear looms large. A single act of courage like Tyrell's decision to record a horrifying incident can ignite a tidal wave of transformation. Call to action. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Help us shine a spotlight on injustice and celebrate the heroes who stand for what's right. Together our voices can spark the change we all need.